This is a Film Stories original podcast.
Love this podcast? Support this show through the Acast supporter feature. It's up to you how much you give, and there's no regular commitment. Just hit the link in the show description to support now.
Explaining football to the friend who's just there for the nachos? Hard. Tailgating from home like a pro with snacks and drinks everyone will love? An easy win. And with Instacart helping deliver the snack time MVPs to your door, you're ready for the game in as fast as 30 minutes. So you never miss a play or lose your seat on the couch or have to go head-to-head for the last chicken wing. Shop Game Day Faves on Instacart and enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 grocery orders. Offer valid for a limited time. Other fees and terms apply. This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. You chose to hit play on this podcast today. Smart choice. Make another smart choice with Auto Quote Explorer to compare rates from multiple car insurance companies all at once. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. At Mint Mobile, we like to do the opposite of what Big Wireless does. They charge you a lot. We charge you a little. So naturally, when they announced they'd be raising their prices due to inflation, we decided to deflate our prices due to not hating you. That's right. We're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes. See details.
This is Writers on Film, the only podcast dedicated to books on cinema. Hello everybody and welcome to Writers on Film. Today we're going to be doing something slightly different. We're reviewing Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino, the novel that was brought out earlier this year in connection to the movie that came out the year before. To discuss the novel with me, I'm going to be talking to Ed Potton from The Times and Damon Wise, a freelance writer whose work has appeared everywhere and who is also an expert on Charles Manson and Quentin Tarantino. He's definitely the person who's interviewed him more than anybody else on this podcast. Let's say that. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Dr. Jonty, DRJONTY. And if you like the episode, but only if you like the episode, remember to like it, subscribe it, and tell all your friends. Before you do any of that, please enjoy the conversation.
That says it all. Yeah. Well, I mean, I do still remember the press conference at Cannes when Tarantino was asked a question about Margot Robbie's character by, I think it was a journalist from the New York Times, who was talking about the fact you had this kind of Oscar-nominated actress and, you know, why was she so underused, blah, blah, blah. And I do still remember Tarantino's look and sort of, I reject that hypothesis, was his sort of rasped reply. So yeah, but I mean, I don't know about you two, but I felt with this book, he was almost trolling the kind of people who would make that kind of criticism of his work, because he kind of amps up all the things that people found problematic with the original film and kind of doubles down on a lot of them, especially Brad Pitt's character.
Absolutely. I think the Brad Pitt character is all the ambivalence just goes out the window, and it's just no, he kills his wife.
Yeah, exactly. There was this kind of, you know, did he or didn't he kill his wife in the film, whereas you're left in little doubt that he did in this. And for good measure, Tarantino throws in, I think, 3 other murders, and also casually mentions that he got into kind of dog fighting and considered becoming a pimp and all this stuff. So it's almost like he's daring you to like this character, which you still do on some level, at least, I think.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, I did read an article really shortly after the film was released saying
that the Brad Pitt character is entirely problematizing, our romance for this sort of like, he just because he takes his shirt off, we're willing to forgive him anything. He's fixing an antenna on the roof of the house, and we're willing to go, yeah, okay, fair enough. Maybe you killed your wife, maybe you didn't, but look at your six pack, and we'll let you get away with it.
He's using him in a different but kind of equally clever way as Fincher used him in Fight Club, isn't he? You've got Brad Pitt, this kind of paragon of manly beauty, and he's kind of testing how far you can push that. We saw Pitt came back from, he had this kind of messy divorce with Angelina Jolie, and it looked for a while like he might be cancelled, but it turns out he was actually okay and seemed to have got out of that. And it was almost like people wanted to kind of still keep on liking Brad, didn't they? So Tarantino definitely plays with that quite cleverly, I think.
What do you think, Damo?
Well, also the idea that the nice movie star is quite a recent construction, really, because if we were to look into the backstories of half the leading men before like 1970, you'd find all sorts of skeletons in their closets, like drink problems, wife beating, all sorts of. And I think it's a really interesting look at the star system. Like, how I know Cliff Booth is not necessarily a star, but he's the kind of next. He's the sort of wingman or the Batman to the as in not the winged Batman, but the sort of the serviceman, that serves the ruling class, so to speak. So yeah, I do like the fact that I think if anything, he's probably over-egged the pudding by trying to get those sorts of backstories in. You just know that half of those things are real stories that belong to, like, I don't know, who did he have a big fight with on Reservoir Dogs? Forget the actor.
Eddie Bunker.
No, the older
Michael
guy.
Madsen.
No, the old. Hang on a second. I think he died soon after, actually.
Lawrence something.
Lawrence Tierney.
Yeah.
Is it?
Yeah.
Hang on. There's been no activity around this one.
The sound of a man desperately Googling information.
You can edit this to make it look like Damo had this at his fingertips, can't you?
Yeah. I'll edit my voice coming in with his answer.
Reader, it was Lawrence Tierney. But no, I think Tarantino, I pretty much had a stand-up fist fight with him over things. He was just refused to do what he was told, and after they, so I think there's a sort of quite a sort of I wouldn't say a romanticization, but a certain respect for the ways of the old way of doing things. These people that just said no when they didn't want to do it. So I'd say we kind of, when we think of a movie star now, we think of Tom Hanks and him being really nice and giving typewriters to charity. But I'm sure when you think of actors like Lawrence Harvey, who really weren't very popular at all. With other actors.
Let's face it, someone like Cliff Booth, had they existed in today's society, would be cancelled in a millisecond, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
He's got all this stuff, but yet at the same time, Tarantino gives him this sort of interior life as an art movie buff. And we have all these pages and pages dedicated to what he thinks about Bergman and his top 5 Kurosawa movies, and which is clearly Tarantino kind of venting his own opinions and just through the bizarre kind of mouthpiece of this otherwise gruff stuntman.
Well, actually, a very good point he makes. There's a good British documentary called British Bulldogs about the British stuntman. John Spire directed it. And it basically says they came out of the army, these people, because no one else was stupid enough to jump off a building. And so that's why you end up, it makes sense that Cliff was in the army. And if he was in the army, what wars would he have been in? He'd have been in Korea, he'd have been, some pretty nasty skirmishes. So there wasn't a university for stuntmen, prior to 1968. I think that was a really interesting point that, he, and this, particularly in the UK, it was retired servicemen who came out of the war and had nothing else to do, and they were just hard cases that would do whatever they were, set themselves on fire, all sorts.
Jackie Chan coming out of the Chinese opera and basically agreeing to fall 50 feet onto cardboard boxes because nobody else would do it, and got the job like that.
I also like the idea of Cliff as being a ringer, which is kind of a stuntman who's not on the regular movie books, who could be brought in to teach an objectionable star a lesson by accidentally, on purpose, hitting him full in the face or whatever, and not having to deal with the flack because he's not on the books and they won't see him again. That was a lovely little touch. You can see that, you know, it's one of those many things that Tarantino is itching to kind of get somewhere into one of his stories, and obviously didn't have room to do it in the movie, so can do it here.
To go back a little bit, your first reactions to the movie, and then what were your reactions to the movie and the book when you sort of grabbed the book and read through it? Did it raise the movie in your estimation? Did it provide you with different stuff, or is it sort of like a totally different thing? Damo, do you want to go first?
Well, it's funny because when I got to page 100, which is the end of the movie, I thought, oh great, this is going to be something else, because I spent a day on set of that movie. It's the scene where Brad Pitt goes home to his dog. He goes back to his little, and there's more of that. That scene was a lot longer. He has a little moment where he goes on his roof and he goes and watches a Raquel Welch movie. Has a bit more interaction with the dog. That's not in the novel, but I thought it was interesting. What was interesting about the novel was it then played out much more like the film that he was explaining to me that he was making, because he kept saying it's set over 2 days in February 1969. Of course, the Manson killings were in August, so 6 months later, 7 months later, and I just couldn't figure out how the Manson thing fitted in. And to be honest, it doesn't really fit in. It is kind of, if it didn't happen at the end, you wouldn't really necessarily notice it. You might feel a little bit shortchanged, but the film isn't driving you towards that thing. It's only your knowledge of what happened on that day that makes you think there's something going to happen in the last reel. So I thought it was really interesting. I think this is closer. The novel is closer to the film that he was making in his head, which wouldn't have all the Tarantino elements that you'd expect, like, you know, violence and tension, and there is some of those things, but they're not really in the not used in the usual genre way. Like I suppose the scariest part really is when Cliff goes to Spahn Ranch, and we don't know what's going to happen to him there. But even then, it's only because we know what the Manson family were capable of in that time.
Which is arguably the scariest part in the movie as well.
Yeah, as I say, I just think, you know, you could probably get rid of that last 10 minutes. I mean, you know, I don't think the ending of the book would necessarily work on film, and he knows that. But I just think it could have worked. It could have been an interesting way for him to do something different, and just end with a quiet scene of you know, contemplation, or, you know, I thought that in the final chapter of the book, I think really works. But whether his fan base would accept that, I don't know. But as I say, my main point is that I think the book is what he was trying to make, a very digressive, freewheeling, day in the life hangout movie, which kind of, because of contractual requirements, had that kind of big splashy ending, which he obviously cared so not little for, but so he was prepared to chuck it out when he came to writing the novel, just because he didn't want to gear the whole book towards it, because it's not that much of a part of the story.
Well, that's really interesting, because I have a friend who watched the film and said, I loved it right up until that last point, and that last scene was, if they'd finished it without the coda, if you like, the last chapter, he would have thought it was the best movie Tarantino had ever made. I disagree with that. I feel that I want the flamethrower moment. I am that fan base, I guess.
You loved that flamethrower bit, didn't you? I remember seeing you after watching it in Cannes, and you were just so delighted with that moment. Thank God.
Yeah, it was that line. It was the line. It wasn't so much that moment. It was when he said, "I still had the flamethrower fully operational." Thank God. That was the line that killed me. You know, I just thought DiCaprio can do comedy so well. Well, what about the same question to you, Ed? Then, you know, your sort of feelings about the movie and the feelings about the relationship with the movie and the novel.
Well, I was really delighted once I got stuck into the novel to realise that he wasn't just going to rehash the emotional peaks from the movie. Now, it's really interesting what Damo was saying about maybe that was closer to what he wanted to do, but certainly I mean, for me, I mean, the two of the biggest kind of peaks in watching the movie were Sharon Tate, played by Margot Robbie's joyous reaction to seeing her pratfall on screen, you know, reduce this whole cinema to laughter. I thought that was a real kind of key moment to me, and also kind of gave a lie to people who said that her character was kind of in the background, because I thought that was a really important scene, even though she didn't have any dialogue in it. and the other one was the one you were talking about, the bloody finale with the flamethrower. These two scenes were both dispensed with. I mean, they're emotional peaks in the original film. Here, they're just little speed bumps. Really, he just throws them away. He sort of almost sort of approaches them in parentheses. And he's much more interested in finding peaks elsewhere, which I thought was really brave, and it sort of it's not what typically what a novelization would have done. So he's clearly kind of pushing the parameters a bit. And Damo mentioned the kind of new finale we get in the book, which I thought was amazing, and I couldn't help but think about how it would have worked on film, where you've got DiCaprio's character on the phone to his 8-year-old co-star, and they're going through the scene. And obviously, the 8-year-old co-star is a yet another mouthpiece for Tarantino. She's the most precocious 8-year-old you've ever heard, and speaks in Tarantino-like cadences. But it works so well, just the chemistry between them. There's a few little sort of iffy bits. Again, Tarantino trolling his audience about the kind of slightly inappropriate relationship between a middle-aged man and an 8-year-old girl, which is slightly queasy. But again, you can see it's him pushing people's buttons and getting a reaction. But yeah, no, I just love the way that he completely reframed the film. And as Damo says, you have he mentions the finale, but only on sort of page 100. So he's completely, he's famed for reordering things, and he's done that in the book, and I love that.
Actually, one thing I'd also say is that he kept saying to me, I've not heard him say this ever since, on that particular day, this was in Halloween, it was a week before Halloween, it was like 2018, I think it was. He kept saying, I'm making a Claude Lelouch movie. I'm making a Claude Lelouch movie. And he specifically mentioned a film called Le Voyou, which is not at all like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. But I just thought it was interesting that as soon as the film came out, he didn't really say that ever again. Because I just don't think, and actually Claude Lelouch did have a film in Cannes that year, and I think he did go to see it.
Oh, did he?
But yeah, I felt a little bit led up the garden path, because I kept telling people, he's making this Claude Lelouch kind of film, and then of course he sort of stopped mentioning it. But there is that sort of, I think it's more of a kind of in a funny way, more of a Jacques Demy film, because it is, I think this, which film is it? Not the singing dancing ones, but something like Model Shop. Right. So that's where you get all that sort of, that's that idea of LA. That's where you get all the oil sort of, what they call drills that sort of that were just that weren't there, that he shipped in to make the scene more exotic.
Sure.
That's where Cliff lives. That looks very much like a scene from Model Shop. So yeah, it's interesting the things he was going for, and not necessarily things that the fans would have come out for if they'd known that's what he was making. Tarantino does Lelouch.
Well, I heard. I don't know who I heard this from. It might have been one of you guys, but I heard that they were very nervous before the premiere. They really didn't know which way it was going to go. Meaning the creative team, the producers, and Tarantino himself. There was a real sense of they didn't know how it was going to land at all, and then they were sort of delighted with the reaction, which was, apart from several sort of voices out of the choir, was pretty much positive.
No, they were pretty confident.
Okay. I'll be.
I went. They did a press day in May, and they showed a long sizzle reel that seemed to be. Yeah, they seemed pretty confident then, because it had only just been announced. I think while I was there, it was announced that it was in Cannes. I think it was literally like the day. It was like May the 1st in 2019. Was the press day in LA, and I think like that day or the day before, it was announced as a late entry to Cannes. So I think they wouldn't have put it into Cannes if they'd have been nervous, because he was certainly pretty pleased with it.
Right. Okay. Fair enough.
And I don't think it's changed, because he did change Inglourious Bastards quite substantially. There was a whole scene that he inserted after Cannes. He tightened up the beginning, because he says he doesn't, but he does do that. But as far as I'm aware, that nothing's changed with. Actually, no. If anything, there was.
I think they might have added a little bit of Great Escape.
Things that weren't ready. Yeah, because the Great Escape footage wasn't ready, and they added the red apples advert at the end.
Because I saw it at Cannes, and then I saw it at Locarno, and I remember thinking, "Hang on a minute, there were a couple of little things that weren't in the Cannes version."
Yeah, so. There was. I think there's a scene of Sharon picking up a hitchhiker and taking her up westward. That wasn't in, but then because also the weird thing is they showed us this sizzle reel which had stuff in that wasn't in the movie, and there's stuff in the poster that isn't in the movie. The little girl on the phone is in the poster. If you look at it, she's smack in the middle of the poster. So it's the strangest film where.
So they did actually shoot that scene that the book finishes.
I think they did.
That's also in the trailer for the book. They put out on YouTube or whatever, they put out a trailer for the book, and it has dialogue from that scene.
Because it did feel incredibly cinematic. I mean, obviously you can't help but think about these things in a cinematic way and describe chapters as scenes and that kind of thing. But I did think, even as I was reading that, I was imagining how he would have done it, and I'm sure it would have been great. I mean, this thing could kind of run and run, couldn't it?
Well, I mean, there's talk of it being a HBO or. I think there was a Hateful Eight miniseries version, I think, which wasn't any longer, but it was only longer in the sense that each like 40 minutes had credits on either end of it. So I think there's definitely a version, much longer version, because you keep seeing bits of it. As I say, even in that EW clip for the book, particularly as I know there's a lot longer in that scene with Brad Pitt when he goes back to his apartment and spends more time with his dog, and he talks to his dog, and then he has this scene where he says something about there's this great line about Raquel Welch, and she said because apparently she was in 4 films over the first weekend of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Raquel Welch appeared in 4 films that you could see in LA on that day, and so there's a scene where Cliff Booth says, if Raquel Welch keeps working at this rate, then maybe I'll just get tired of her. But maybe I might just get tired of her.
Oh, yeah. But I mean, I love this kind of the sort of tension between the fact that he's so fastidious with fitting in with all the historical detail. Like apparently he timed exactly how long it would take Polanski and Tate to drive up Cielo Drive and all of this. But then he takes, kind of craven liberties with it as well. So there was the bit in which they're talking about a remake of The Lady in Red, directed by Quentin Tarantino, which kind of, it reminded me, I don't know if you've read Money by Martin Amis. There's a bit in Money where there's a character called Martin Amis who kind of walks into the story, and it did very much remind me of that. And that was famously the point at which Kingsley Amis, his father, stopped reading the book and sort of threw it across the room. But it's very much like that, isn't it? He's just doing it because he can. And there's something kind of laudable about that, just kind of that sheer kind of chutzpah of doing it. And there's also that character who they meet in the bar. Cliff and Rick meet this musician in the bar called Curtis. I'm going to have to read this because I didn't know what Curtis Zastupil, who was who was Quentin's real life stepfather. He was a real person, and he talks about having a son called Quentin. So it's getting so solipsistic, it's amazing. But I just, he does it so well. He does it with such panache. You kind of forgive him, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was a period in the 80s, 90s that if you didn't put yourself in your own novel, you didn't get it published. I mean,
he's still clinging on to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with the word you used, the chutzpah. I really got that with Inglourious Bastards when spoiler, he kills Hitler, and I just thought, oh, that's such a great idea. But with Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I expected him to do what he did. It didn't feel like a twist. It felt like, it doesn't make sense. It'd be disappointing if they didn't, What did you think of the way Manson was treated? Because I know, Damo, you're a bit of a Manson expert. I don't think it's unfair to say.
I think it figures. I mean, who knows with that story? You read so many books and come back to the first one you started with, which is Helter Skelter, which is a load of rubbish, but it's the most plausible version of the not plausible, the most entertaining of the versions yet. So, what did I think? So I think it does locate Manson as a character. Basically, it works well as a fiction with Manson as that character, because I kind of like the fact that Manson's. It's a bit of a rat race, going on in Hollywood, and Manson's sort of in that world. I mean, he was in that world, really. I mean, he was trying to get a record deal Whether he was obsessed with it is another matter. I mean, this is where it all kind of this is the point in the path that people divide. So if you believe that Manson really was that bothered about a record contract, that he'd been away for a few days, came back to the ranch and just sent some people to kill some people, for whatever reason, because he was so angry about not getting a record contract, that doesn't really, when in fact there's the two other theories. One is that there was a drug burn gone wrong, which basically Tex Watson took matters into his own hands and was being sold bad acid. So had been sold some bad, just been stiffed on some ecstasy, I think, by Wachowski, because they did have MDMA in their systems, which is something that's never very widely publicized. I mean, they were quite druggy in that household. I don't think, apparently Sharon
quite ahead of
wasn't,
their time narcotically.
Yes, yeah, and so there's one room. One of the theories is that it was a drug deal gone wrong, and they got revenge on them.
Oh, wait a second. The people in the household, like Sharon Tate and everyone, had MDMA in their system, or
it was Frukowski the rumor is that they were all sort of involved. Everyone apart from Sharon was sort of involved in some way in the narcotics industry. So
right.
So I mean, I'm just floating this as a theory that they basically were dealing drugs or had promised to deal drugs, and the drugs were not forthcoming. So Tex Watson took a lot of amphetamine and went a bit crazy. The other one, slightly more plausible to me in a funny way, is because they were all crazy, is that Bobby Beausoleil, their old mate, had just gone to a prison for murdering a sort of a Buddhist teacher down the road. And so while Manson was away, the girls decided, let's get Bobby out of prison and let's commit another murder, so everyone thinks there's a copycat around.
The alibi, yeah.
So I mean, I'm only mentioning these because these are not mentioned at all in Tarantino's version. He sticks strictly with the fact that Manson was a failed musician who took revenge on Terry Melcher, even though he knew he wasn't living in that house. He'd been round. I mean, he knew he wasn't there. As in the film, he goes round. So I kind of think that he makes a decision very, very early on to stick with the perceived narrative of the time, which was all everyone would know. I mean, weirdly, actually, if it was being of the time, the immediate reaction to that case was drugs. It wasn't hippie cult leader, and they didn't know who it was for about 3 months. In fact, even Bruce Lee was suspected, which is why I thought he might. That might be hinted to in the book, but instead he makes him out to be a really unsportsmanlike stunt person, or
sort of loudmouth braggart.
Yes. So yeah, I don't know if I'm answering your question really. So yes, in terms of, I do think it's quite a reductive vision of Manson, but I think it serves its purpose in terms of having another entertainer. Everybody's trying to make a go of it in LA, and Sharon has made it quite by almost, I wouldn't say almost by accident, but just almost effortlessly. So she's at the top, and everyone else is sort of like spiraling around her, and then Manson is just one of these people in the orbit trying to get by. Because I mean, that's indisputable. He was trying to get by. He was stealing credit cards, and whether murder was on his mind is a whole different thing entirely.
I always wonder with Manson, in terms of the book and in terms of the film as well, that everybody, the critic from the New York Times mentions about Margot Robbie not having that many lines, but Manson sort of, you expect the guy turning up at the cinema like who was the guy from the Thin Red Line? Yeah, turning up at the cinema saying, "I'm Manson in the new film, which is all about me," and then he gets one wave and that's it. It's he gets very little to do. So I mean, the film ends up not really being about Manson at all.
And did you notice the book completely dispenses with the Manson subplot a few chapters before the end, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
Did you think there was any sort of rhyme or reason in that, or did Tarantino just get bored with it?
I don't think he was ever really that interested in the Manson family as the Manson family. He said to me once, it's kind of like they were like the mildew around like an old painting of or an old photograph. The Manson family were like the mildew creeping around the edges of an old picture of Los Angeles. So I think in a way
that's a lovely picture. That's a lovely
image, and it really encapsulates the slightly sort of seaminess, kind of gone to seed, slightly forgotten, and that's what makes them dangerous, isn't it? The fact that they are on the margins, no one's really aware of them. That's what gives them their sinister aspect, doesn't it?
Well, I think what attracts to most of the Manson family is that they were living on Spahn Ranch. They're basically living on on the old Western studios, and that's what they were reduced to. Just like
which again is yet another sort of perfect metaphor for the passing golden age that Rick and Cliff were part of.
And it was only it's only 8 years before You know, it's not like that's how quickly it all changed. You know,
Yeah, and
they're making fun of him.
Cliff Booth turning up and saying, you know, oh, George, are you okay, George? And it's like, well, hang on a minute. You guys haven't been around for years. What kind of friends are you? You haven't been around for years. So
yeah, suddenly you're really protective. It's like, yeah.
You've got, what's this? I get an old person's home. I get some sort of, you know, whereas these hippies, at least they give me. I mean, the one thing I objected to with the use of Manson, but this is a gripe I've got generally with the culture rather than Tarantino in particular, is that nobody ever brings up the fact that Manson was an out and out neo-Nazi and racist. It's sort of like, oh, he was a hippie. Well, he was a racist. I would put racist before hippie. I would put neo-Nazi
but Cliff and Rick arguably wouldn't. They'd arguably see hippie as the kind of top of the list of insults, wouldn't they?
Right.
Well, certainly, you're left in no uncertain terms that being a hippie is not a thing they aspire to be.
Yeah, well, that's exactly. They see hippiedom as basically the thing that's sort of brushing them aside, and yet at the same time, it's what they aspire to. He wants to work with Polanski, and Polanski is definitely more of a hippie than he is 1950s, Mad
Well,
Men.
yeah, and the fact that people like Sharon Tate are more interested in men who look like 12-year-old boys or whatever the line was, which is very much type. Not what. Yeah. I mean, there's an obsession with sort of various forms of paedophilia in this story, isn't there? I mean, again, having a pop at Polanski for obvious reasons, but again, it's because it's kind of slightly squeamish territory. He loves the discomfort, doesn't he?
What do you think of the Polanski link, Damo?
I think this is what makes it such an LA story. You can't tell the story without him, but he's not integral to it. But neither is Manson integral to it. But they're all part of it. Sort of. Well, I suppose Manson's a little bit more integral to it. But I mean, it is just that. I think that's probably what's so fascinating about it. Just there are all these. It plugs into show business on every level. So when Sharon goes to a party, she's not just going to any party. She's going with the mamas and the papas and her showbiz friends, and it's in that town. It's impossible not to be connected. So everything is all weirdly interconnected, and there's these different sort of kind of archive of show business. The fact that she had a thing for Steve McQueen had a thing for her, but he was probably too old for her by that point, or she was off doing her own other thing. So just the fact that even in the aftermath of Sharon Tate's murder, you had all the people that just kind of got involved. Like Steve McQueen was putting up money, and Lee Marr people were going to their funerals with guns and like all that stuff. I mean, Polanski thought Bruce Lee had done it. I mean, that's almost like a Stella Street sketch or something. It's like a comedy sketch, isn't it? Like, just the fact that, who do you know who killed my wife? Was it Bruce Lee of all people? But that's how. And in fact, if anything, I think John Phillips of the Mamas and the Papas was considered as a possible culprit at one point.
And he was a terrible criminal in his own way, wasn't he, John
Phillips?
Yes,
very dark man.
Yes, I mean,
going back to the paedophilia and
yes, I was going to say you can't get away from it. On a lighter note, one of my favourite additions in the book, which wasn't anywhere near the film, I mean, it may have been in a version of the film, was this story about Dalton when he was working with George Cukor, and had the temerity to make a suggestion to the great director, and said, and he actually calls cut. That's right, which no one would ever do on a George Cukor set.
Yeah,
and says and suggests that it's a good time to take a dramatic pause. And then Cukor says, I'm reading this, Mr. Dalton, it is my fervent belief that up to now your entire career has been one long dramatic pause. And you can just totally imagine Cukor saying that. And that again is, Tarantino showing off how well he knows all of these kind of personalities from yesteryear and can kind of speak in their voices. But it works so well.
There's also a bit with Polanski where I mean, I think it's seen through Sharon Tate's eyes where he repositions the camera so something's in the way. And and everybody in the audience, Polanski says a year later when they're watching the gala, watch with the audience now, and everybody in the audience shifts to see past the obstacle on the screen, and he's manipulated them.
It's a really strange moment in the film because it's not of a piece with the other cinematography. It's a very strange choice that he's deliberately done, because she's on the phone and you can't see her face or the phone. You just see the back of her head.
But
I thought that was
it's a little bit like the Sharon Tate scene, isn't it? It's realizing the power you have over an audience of people. I can make all the people in this room do that at the same time, in the same way that she can make everyone burst into laughter by doing the pratfall. And that's why I thought, that scene was the essence of the film, because it is, if you strip everything away, it is about the power of storytelling, isn't it?
And it's also your teenage dream of, if you want to be in a movie, what would you? I mean, my dream as a writer is walking into the bookshop or being on a train and seeing somebody read my book and laugh, and me going, "Oh, what page you on?" You want to have some kind of direct relationship with the people that you're writing for or you're performing for.
Definitely.
actually my favourite chapter is the one where Cliff meets Aldo Ray in a hotel, and it's just quite a great. It would have been a great short story. Just this sort of this washed-up guy, and he's not allowed
Whatever
to
you
have
do,
booze.
don't give him drink.
Yeah. And of course he does, because he can't resist it.
Yeah, he's basically the id of the book, isn't he? I mean, Rick Dalton is the ego. He's battling with himself to don't have 5 whiskey sours or 8 whiskey sours, have 2 or 3. And Cliff Booth is just like, whatever cigarette doused in acid, here we go, away we go. He just hasn't got any. And so if you get in an argument with him, you're probably going to get killed. I mean, he's a sociopath. He's not got any boundaries.
Something we did talk about is that's in the book is it's not really mentioned in the film. I think they kind of figured it out either during the film or during the publicity for it. But Pete Jewell, who's in Alias Smith and Jones, and apparently I didn't know this. Apparently, so Pete Jewell killed himself after the first series, and in the UK, we were midway through showing that series. In America, they'd kind of moved on, and they just accepted the new series and ran it as normal. But in the UK, we were so mad about that series that we just stopped. We just basically had to stop showing it, and it was a long time before they ever showed it again, because people were just so upset about losing this character. Whereas in America, because it was it was so last season, they kind of had moved on by the time he shot himself. I don't know if you remember that story. I mean, but it was such a big deal at the time. I mean, it was and so I think that's really, really interesting that he managed to work that into the book and sort of give it a bit more serious consideration about someone who's bipolar in the movie industry, and we know how that panned out. So,
do you think that Tarantino, after this book, I mean, because he's always talked about writing books, he's always talked about, like, I remember when he was doing Django Unchained, and he was saying, I started writing a book about spaghetti westerns, which hasn't yet appeared, and I realized, actually, instead of writing this book, I'm just going to write my own spaghetti western. And he talked about doing a graphic novel of the Kill Bill character, the bride. Do you think that he's got like a box of books ready to go?
No, I don't think there's a box of books. I think there are definitely chapters. Definitely. I know what they are. Some of them. Oh God. Every now and then he'll throw out some chapter titles, and he'll do like 4 or 5 pages on stones. I think one of them was, oh God, but it was so-and-so's Adventures in New Hollywood.
Did he write anything about the Vega brothers?
Well, that was touted as a possible film for years.
Yeah,
and years.
I had it in my head that he'd written some kind of prose on it as well, but maybe I'm making that up.
Maybe he's probably got treatments and stuff. But I think he does definitely every now and then he'll sit down and write a chapter about something that happened. There's one I remember. It was two names of 2 directors, and it said so and so-and-so's Adventures in New Hollywood.
Two real life directors.
Yes, yeah. So I don't know if you see on the New Beverly, these little bits and pieces pop up there, like little essays on movies. So I think he just does stuff.
I mean, the key thing for me reading the book was, we all know he can do dialogue. We all know he's a font of ideas and trivia and opinions and all of that. It was the sort of bits between the dialogue that I thought he was untested on. But I think he writes really well. He's got a nice, clean, spare prose style, a little bit of Elmore Leonard in there, I think you can detect, which isn't surprising. But I'd love to read more by him. I think he's clearly got what it takes. And this isn't good just because we all love, well, all 3 of us at least love the film. There's more to it than that. It does have literary merit, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, and that was going to be my next question, was basically, how does he stand up as a novelist? I mean, my personal experience of it was, I think it was similar to yours, Ed. I just devoured it in a couple of days. I went right through it. Now that's not necessarily means it's a brilliant book. That I read Jack Reacher novels in 2 days, and I would never sort of hold them up as.
Hey, I'm Ryan Reynolds. Recently, I asked Mint Mobile's legal team if big wireless companies are allowed to raise prices due to inflation. They said yes. And then when I asked if raising prices technically violates those onerous 2-year contracts, they said, "What the f*** are you talking about, you insane Hollywood ass?" So to recap, we're cutting the price of Mint Unlimited from $30 a month to just $15 a month. Give it a try at mintmobile.com/switch.
$45 upfront payment equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Taxes and fees extra. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes per details.
This episode is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Do you ever find yourself playing the budgeting game? Well, with the Name Your Price tool from Progressive, you can find options that fit your budget and potentially lower your bills. Try it at progressive.com. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Price and coverage match limited by state law. Not available in all states.
Great works of literature, but they're really good engines, for what they do. They do what they do extremely well. And I think he does what he does. There are real limitations to that. I think when the author pokes through so frequently, slightly regardless of, like Agent Smith with people in the Matrix, you just sort of, and suddenly Tarantino's face has appeared, in Sharon Tate's clothes or in Roman Polanski's clothes or wherever. I think that's a weakness as a novelist. I think that there's that's a weakness as a writer. But having said that, it didn't stop me, and those points were always interesting, even as I recognized that the voice had sort of broken the fourth wall somewhat.
And I think it's kind of impossible to separate Tarantino, the writer, from Tarantino, the ridiculous kind of ego. I mean, and if you did, there would be something lost, wouldn't there?
But also, I mean, I thought it was quite smart that he's kind of written it in the style of a tie-in novel, which I thought that was pretty, a pretty hard tone to affect, and he kind of nailed it in the sense that we know that it kind of doesn't take itself so seriously that it's aiming for. It's not like Morrissey's novel or something like that. It's not something so archly self-serious. I think
Morrissey wrote a novel.
Yeah,
Oh.
It was called The List of the Lost or something. It had a famously terrible sex scene in it.
I did not know. I read his autobiography for my sins. And,
I couldn't get through it.
You're more man than I am.
There's no chapter stop, so it just crumbles on, and you just think, where was I? And there's nowhere to sort of.
No anchor.
It goes on and on and on, and there's no sort of not divided into anything. I mean, that's
Morrissey making bad decisions. Who would have thunk it?
But just going back to the novel structure. I mean, he had a great structure. I thought, how is he going to end it? And he did find a structure.
And I loved the adverts in the back of of the book, and the although I think the dedication to the guys who were who made it happen, including Robert Blake, who shot his wife in the head in a parking lot of a restaurant. He could have. I mean,
it's trolling on a grand scale, isn't it?
Grand Guignol scale, I would say at this point.
But it's why I think people shouldn't take him too seriously. I mean, he is, apart from everything else, he's a really good comedy writer. He's really funny, and he is taking the piss a lot of the time, isn't he?
Yeah, no, I think he is. I think he's hilarious and incredibly entertaining. Do I like everything he writes and everything he says? Do I agree with it? Absolutely not. No, 100% no.
And it would be worrying if you did.
Yeah,
but I'm not even sure he believes everything he's writing. He just knows he's an expert button pusher, isn't he? He delights in getting a rise out of people, as he did at that press conference. Although, he didn't take particularly kindly to being criticised. But
I'm not sure how in control he is of that. I think that's sort of become a bit of a reflex now. I don't think it's quite as playful as you might be characterising there. What do you think, Damo? You know the guy. You're best buds.
Not really. No, I've probably seen him more than most people. But just, I think what was a little bit offensive about that question was that I think he was offensive to him rather was the fact that he's not doing it would be more offensive to give her lots of rat-a-tat crazy hip dialogue, be a person that actually absolutely wasn't just to make her one of his characters. So he was doing giving her some space, which is quite a rare thing in one of his films. And so then to say you haven't given her anything to say is quite would have been quite I think he was definitely quite insulted by that, because it's quite a
I think deservedly so, because as I said before, I do think, well, I certainly came out of that film, and her performance was one of the things that lingered in my memory most strongly. Partly, as you say, because she didn't have lines. She did a lot with a relative little. But it was those scenes, particularly that one in the cinema, that really lived with me.
Her dancing to the record and her being at the party and sort of going to the bookshop,
and buying Roman Polanski the first edition of Tess, which he then made after she died.
Yes.
There's little things like that which do they have to be subtitled for people who are stupid, just sort of things like that got me, the fact that but she didn't say much, so it couldn't have been a performance.
Yeah, it's a little bit of the sort of the way criticism sometimes feels like it's going, where we're timing things and we're dividing things, and I mean, a little bit like the Bechdel test, that is great. It's a great tool to just think about, but it's not, and I don't think it was ever meant to be a formula which decides, whether something is a feminist movie or not.
No, I was just going to say your point about him not being completely in control of the little storms he sets off, I think is totally true. But I do think he enjoys it, and as you say, maybe in a kind of a sort of compulsive way, he's just sort of addicted to it now, isn't he? But yeah, you're right. That doesn't necessarily mean he knows where all these things are going to lead.
Yeah. I mean, I think the worst example of that, not so much the Sharon Tate example, but was the Bruce Lee, in that I think he misspoke a couple of times in a way that he could have easily dialed back and sort of didn't. I think when he was talking about comparing Bruce Lee to American stuntmen, when of course Bruce Lee was American. It wasn't like he was he was Chinese American, but he was still American,
Yeah.
And I think that those sort of things, he could have easily went, oh, fuck it, yeah, I misspoke, I should have said this, and that's.
He tends to kind of double down or lash out when confronted with those situations, doesn't he? As he did in that press conference.
And I think that particular comment was on Joe Rogan, and people seem to lose their minds when they go on that particular podcast. Joe Rogan, by the way, for our listeners might not have heard of it. It's another not quite as popular podcast as this one. So I just wanted to point that out.
Slightly less stellar guests.
Exactly. Elon Musk asked to come on this podcast. I said, have you written a book about a film? No. So shut up. So are you looking forward to the next Quentin Tarantino novel and the next Quentin Tarantino film? And what do you think it might be, given that he's sort of said that he's done?
Well, the next book will be criticism. It's going to be it's going to be a compendium book of all these sort of his thoughts on, I think, he seems to be specifically keen on sort of late 60s, early 70s. Maybe more early. I think 1970 is a big thing for him, because I asked him if he was, if Once Upon a Time in Hollywood was in some way a precursor to his interest in the 70s, and he sort of said no, completely different.
Good long question, very short answer.
But he did. There's a the Lumiere Festival in France it's about a couple of months after Cannes. It's like September, October. He did a 2-hour lecture there a few years ago it's literally called 1970, and I think he did like 4 films, about how porno chic, this sort of just the kind of things, what was happening in 1970, how the porn film nearly went mainstream, this sort of stuff. So I imagine the next book will be a sort of like him. He'll be taking the critics head on and sort of saying, look, you can't make a film, but I can do what you do. And I think that'll be another bit of epic trolling there. So I'm sure there'll be some character. There'll be some. I think there'll be some. What's the word? Careers redefined.
Surely he's going to make another film, though. I mean, surely he's not going to stick to that.
He's got one more, hasn't he? He's got one more.
There is one more, but I mean, surely there'll be more than that. I don't know.
It's either 10. Well, it's either 10 and out, or retire at 60. But there's still the door open to television and theatre. So it's a kind of a bit of there's a little. I wouldn't say it's a cheat, but there's a little bit of wiggle room to get out.
Yeah, I mean, you could see. Yeah, imagine if Netflix got hold of them or or HBO. It would be
It's not like he's been banging them out like Alfred Hitchcock either. I mean, or even Steven Soderbergh, who when he retired, when was it? 20 years ago he retired. And has since made how many movies?
I think he will, in terms of celluloid films. I think he will retire because it's such, it's quite a big effort to, I kind of agree with him on the old man movies thing. So you see some of the older huffing and puffing.
I don't know. John Huston's The Dead, Sidney Lumet. There were some old geezers who still managed to make really good films. Brian De Palma. I'm not waiting for his next film.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, Lynch made Mulholland Drive when he was pretty old, didn't he? I mean, yeah. I mean,
No, but he's talking about career directors, studio directors that just bosh, and then they. I mean, he's talked about this specifically in terms of the mortgage, paying the mortgage films. So that's what we're talking. We're not talking about old directors being old, but it's just directors, becoming
turning into hacks.
Making old man films because they just need to pay the wives and the mortgage. It's more. Yeah, it's not just saying you've.
I mean, it's interesting when you talking about him doing criticism because he's been very vocal. I mean, he keeps saying things like that, but Francois Truffaut wrote criticism. Godard wrote criticism. I mean,
they went the other way.
It's been a permeable. That separation between critic and filmmaker doesn't really hold water. But
there aren't many who do both, though, are there? I mean, Bogdanovich.
Brady used to do it.
Yeah.
There are a fair few. I think there are a fair few. I don't necessarily have loads of names off the top of my head, but
there aren't many directors as high profile as him who would regularly do criticism. I would say.
Well, regularly do criticism, no. Write about film, yes. I mean,
Scorsese does.
Alexander McKendrick had a massive career, Ealing Comedies, Sweet Smell of Success, retired and taught and wrote books for a full 20, 30 years of his active career.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm talking about sort of now, recently. It's not something that you see often, is it?
Yeah, I guess the industry doesn't really encourage that, because you've got to be diplomatic if you're going to be creative and working with other people. So you don't really have those. I remember the last time Spike Lee and Quentin Tarantino would be an example of where there was sort of a public falling out, or Paul Thomas Anderson and David Fincher had a big brouhaha over.
He and Spike fell out over the use of the N-word, right?
That's right, yeah.
Yeah, which, watching some of his earlier films is kind of slightly uncomfortable in that regard sometimes, I think, even though it wouldn't stop me from watching them. I don't know whether you guys feel the same.
Go on, David.
I mean, this is where he kind of he's always been, I wouldn't say he is Teflon, but he's always seemed that he's felt that he's Teflon, because his argument is always that's what my characters would say.
But he did seem to take particular relish, particularly when it's his character in Pulp Fiction who is using the N-word, didn't he?
And I think that was Spike Lee's point. The use of the N-word per se, it was he's making this film as an excuse as a white guy to use the N-word with Samuel L. Jackson. That was he's living out a fantasy. But so many this is where I can't disentangle Tarantino from his movies, is so many of his films seem like wish fulfillment fantasies.
And the book too.
Oh, massively, massively, even more so maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh, it's complete geek wish fulfillment fantasies, but they're so compelling that why not?
Actually, I did wonder because he did write like 7 episodes of Lancer. So that could be something that, I mean, this is quite fascinating, the things that he says he might do and then never. I think he's quite. I think it was Eli Roth said it's kind of an interesting sort of way of keeping your career going by keeping people feeding people these continuous like loop of things you might do when you've got no intention of ever really doing them. But it keeps
Star
everybody.
Trek movie he was going to do, and he was going
Well,
to do
that did
Casino
exist. That did
Royale.
exist.
What I mean, the script existed.
No, I think maybe it was a treatment, but there was certainly a script that was. There was a version of a script that he worked on. I think someone mentioned it recently that there were.
It's an R-rated Star Trek movie.
Wow, I'd watch that.
Do you think? Yeah, I would, but I think they already did it with Starship Troopers.
Well, yeah, essentially they did, didn't they? I mean, yeah, he's just got such a phenomenal store of arcane knowledge, and it's sort of so effortlessly deployed. I did an interview with Edgar Wright recently for the Sparks documentary, and he said, because he and Quentin are mates, they obviously share a certain kind of sensibility.
He's the only person that has any connection with him at the moment, I think. Since during the lockdown, Edgar was the only person he was in contact with.
Really? Why is that?
Yeah. No, he just when he disappears, he disappears. There's no. I think he's got. There was a rumor that he had an iPad. I don't think he's got a mobile. When he's not working, you just can't get hold of him. But apart from Edgar, mysteriously can. He was
talking about the fact that he told Quentin, "Oh, yeah, I'm making this documentary about Sparks," and Tarantino said, "Oh, if you interview Jane Wiedlin, you got to interview anyone who makes a documentary about Sparks. Has got to interview Jane Wiedlin." For those who don't know, she formerly in the Go-Go's had a relationship with Russell Mael of Sparks. And Edgar Wright hadn't thought about this, and then immediately, pretended that was all in the works. Oh yeah, of course I'm interviewing her, and then immediately ran off and got hold of her agent and got her in the film. And she's basically the best thing in it, other than the Sparks brothers, and that sort of casually, drop something that kind of completely makes your film massively better in the drop of a hat.
That encyclopedic knowledge, and I mean,
totally.
That enthusiasm, I think, is something that we can sometimes underrate. We live in such a cynical age that enthusiasm that he definitely and honestly has for movies and can convey. When I sit and watch,
and not just movies. I mean, as you see in this, I mean, TV and music almost equally.
Oh yeah,
I think and he really digs into TV and his love for those Western serials and music as well. I mean, he can go on about hence the Jane Wiedlin stuff. So it's kind of like a 3-pronged thing, and books as well, actually. So maybe 4-pronged.
That's a lot of prongs, man.
Yes, it really is. It's more than a trident. And I was tantalised by what you were saying about theatre, Damo. So has he actually made any public statements about being interested in doing theatre?
Yeah, I think there was talk of doing Reservoir Dogs as a play or something. I mean,
which would make sense.
And even Hateful Eight, he was going on about that being the Iceman cometh. No, I think he has talked about it. I mean, when people would go, wouldn't they? I mean, because he would always get the one thing.
He'd get actors.
I was going to say the thing that always annoys me about when people sort of try and I think he's right to sort of to limit the number of films he's going to make, because he's going to be very, very over soon in a kind of cancelled way, because there'll be a whole new wave of directors that it's that kill your fathers kind of cycle that we see in filmmaking, where he'll be I mean, the fact that we can't get any women to talk about the movie and talk about the book suggests that there are already people sort of weighing up and measuring his coffin to say it's just toxic masculinity,
and he probably knows that, doesn't he?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think because at the premiere of Once Upon in Hollywood, I could feel some of the stuff missing, not landing, because the audience was too young, and I mean, I'm sort of too young, but I mean, I know what the references are, and I mean, a lot of it goes whizzing over our heads at our age because it's from a much earlier Hollywood. But I really felt a lot of the stuff kind of wasn't landing, and I think the next few generations of film goers are not going to be into the minutiae as much as he is. I think it's going to be a bit like, it might just become a bit of a hipster thing with vinyl, with dial telephones, and people who collect typewriters and instead of iPads, that sort of thing. I think he might become a bit niche, because he captured something so incredibly well in 1992, and he's still he's the only one still doing it, really. I mean, Spike Lee is probably, how many people have had a 30-year career? I mean, there's not really that many. There's only him and Linklater in that generation.
Coen brothers.
When did they first? No, they were sort of 84. They were an 80s kind of thing. So he was of the 90s. This is what I'm saying.
Okay,
the waves,
I see. Of that
in the
specific
waves.
cohort.
Yes.
Paul Thomas Anderson, maybe.
Yeah, he's of the later. Yeah, he came a bit. When was he? That was the end of the 90s, so he was almost cusp of the 2000s.
But to your point, Damo, when I watched in the early 90s, I watched Reservoir Dogs, and Michael Marsden says to Harvey Keitel, I bet you're a big Lee Marvin fan. Everyone in the audience knew who Lee Marvin was.
Mm-hmm.
I knew who Harvey Keitel was. Most people knew who Harvey Keitel was. So there were things bouncing around there that were just available to everybody without any geekiness required. Fast forward to Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I get it. It's not meant to be contemporary the way Reservoir Dogs was. So it is a period piece, but there'll be swathes of the audience who don't really know who Steve McQueen is. There'll be people who know who he is, but have never actually sat through a film but with him in it. Which isn't true of people our age, of course, because The Great Escape was mandatory every Easter, but there are a whole bunch. I'm 49 years old, there are whole swathes of film history that I assume are a given, wrongly. Absolutely wrongly. They're not a given. I mean, people are starting with The Matrix. They're starting with Fight Club. That's the first film they've taken seriously, and they're going from there, on.
But what you have now is Wikipedia and at your fingertips, so you can bone up on this stuff relatively easily in a way that you couldn't when we were kids. So it's that much easier to delve into it if you're interested. So
true. I just mean it as a given thing that I wouldn't need to go to my local library in 1991.
Yeah,
no, but there was an element of it being slightly kind of, you had to make an effort to know about this stuff in a way that you don't necessarily now. I think you can crib up on it. You won't have a deep, but you can use these things at your fingertips to kind of give you a rough awareness, and then discover more if you want to. If you want to go and watch a Lee Marvin film after that, you can do it.
No, I think John's right in a way. Is that what's going to happen to Quentin is the fact that he can no longer rely on everybody having a shared history of cinema. So, for example, if I was a kid and a black and white film came on, I'd say, "Who's that?" And then my dad would say, "That's Humphrey Bogart." So I would know who Humphrey Bogart was, because my dad, who we were watching, it was on television in our house. Whereas now, what are the chances of a Humphrey Bogart movie? What are the chances of a whole family sitting down to watch a Humphrey Bogart movie and everybody knowing who he is? It's so I think the fragmentation of culture will affect his films quite severely, I think. So
even to use another example, the opening of Reservoir Dogs, they're talking about Madonna, and maybe Madonna is one of the last sort of huge divas that kind of everybody knows. You don't have to listen to her songs. You don't have to be a fan.
That's exactly the point. If you remade that scene, if you redid that scene with Dua Lipa, how many people would say it's an iconic scene still? Would it still be interesting?
Or Lady Gaga. I mean, there are equivalent names you could put up there, but
Lady Gaga would work.
Lady Gaga would probably work more, yeah. But listen,
but it's
guys.
still an interesting point.
Yeah, it's always an interesting point when Johnny Boy's on the case. Listen, I wanted to also ask you, because this is Writers on Film, we're doing a slightly unusual episode in that we're reviewing a book rather than how many out of 5? How many stars out of 5 would you give Once Upon a Time in Hollywood by Quentin Tarantino, the novelization?
Oh. We don't tend to give star ratings to books, because I did review it for the Times, but we didn't give it. I would have given it at least a 4.
Yeah,
I would have given it a 4. I think.
Yeah, 4 or 5. I read it in like 2 sittings. I mean, I often put things down and don't pick them up again, so I went straight through it. So yeah, I would give it a 4 or 5. I liked it a lot.
Brilliant.
As I say, it does augment the film in a way that I wasn't expecting it to.
You see, I'd give it a 5. So Quentin, if you're listening, I gave it a 5. Hey Mo, your best friend.
But I don't know about books. It means that means there can be no better book. So
no, it doesn't. That's not what it doesn't. 5-star. No. That's like a 5-star film. We've got to give it.
Well, you can only give one in your lifetime. I quite like the purity of that, actually.
Yeah. But the person, if you heard about somebody else doing that, you would think, what a prat. You wouldn't think, oh, what a noble, oh, he's reserved his because you're bound to disagree with whatever his final film is. It's like,
you know
it's
what
like
though? I mean,
Sight and
I gave
Sound
the
with
film
Vertigo, you know?
5 stars. So maybe I would say I didn't enjoy the book quite as much as the film, but it's only a quite close run thing.
I wonder
if you had to pick them.
I wonder if you'd read the book first. I wonder what that would be like. Because novelizations came out.
There must be people doing that in the world, mustn't there? Now,
Well, in the old days, they came out here before the prince had come over from the States. So
it was your way of kind of like feeling what it was like to be American and get things first, wasn't it?
I read Return of the Jedi by James Caan. I don't know if that's a real name or just Alan Dean Foster's one of his numerous pseudonyms. But I read Return of the Jedi like months before I saw the film, and then kind of regretted it, thinking,
I was going to say, what? Yeah, I can see why you would want to do it, but it would be a bad thing to do.
Greedy child.
I read Zoltan, Hound of Dracula. That was a good one. And the Halloween novelization was quite good.
Do they still exist in the same way, novelizations? Because I haven't really been actively looking for them, so I don't know. But do they still churn them out? Is there still a market for them?
I don't think so.
Terry Brooks did the Phantom Menace, and he was like an established fantasy writer, and he did the Phantom Menace novelization. I remember that being a big thing. I actually think that that's what's happened is like the Star Wars. There's been so many novels that are sort of official novels that are part of the universe that it's almost become, and also Alien, there's quite a few spin-off novels. So I think spin-off novels, and for instance, there was a Alien 3 was scripted by William Gibson. It was and I think they wrote that up either as a graphic novel or they've done it as an Audible. They've definitely done it as an Audible audiobook dramatization. So I think those avenues are being pursued, but straight novelizations, I don't think there's a market for them anymore. No, sadly, because that they were that was my introduction to literature. My introduction to literature was actually reading a novel, thinking I was reading a novelization, and I was actually reading Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep?
Oh.
And so I was
or
thinking,
were you?
Okay, let's move on. I asked you to choose a film book to recommend to our listeners. Damo, what you want to go first?
So it can be anything to do with film whatsoever, can't it?
Yeah.
So my book is called Nice Guys Don't Work in Hollywood, and it is the adventures of an aesthete in the movie business, written by Curtis Harrington. And it's a great book. It's about basically a guy who started out making experimental films. He worked with Dennis Hopper on a film called Night Tide, and ended up making the Colbys on television. But he had a sort of career in
the Colbys was like the Dynasty spin-off?
Dynasty spin-off, yeah.
Right.
It's
Dynasty or Dynasty?
Well, depending on which side of the Atlantic you are.
Yeah, so it's a really, really good, easy read. It's just about a woman's, growing up. It's the only book I've ever read that mentions Andre Gide and the Colbys in the same, in the same chapters, whatever. But he's just, he directed Who Slew Auntie Brew and What's the Matter with Helen. So he had a kind of a good schlocky horror career, very gay as well. So lots of anecdotes, but just a very, very easy read. I think it's out of print now, but I actually did buy my copy in Hollywood. But it's a really good it's a really good film about somebody whose career didn't really kind of take off, but he hasn't really sort of he takes it in his stride. It's all very it's not a bitter memoir at all. As I say, he started out as a really, really weird sort of he was from the Kenneth Anger mold, and then he just went into this complete mainstream thing, but maintained his integrity the whole way through.
So how did you sort of come across this guy? Did you like his films first and then find the book, or?
I don't know. I just was aware of him. I just knew he did a film called Night Tide with Dennis Hopper, which is a kind of very early sort of experimental horror.
Yeah, it's on Mubi, I think.
Yeah. So that's sort of how he got to be known, and then he sort of I'm trying to think hang on. What other filmmaker has A, created influential avant-garde films alongside friends like Maya Deren and Kenneth Anger, B, directed critically acclaimed and cult-adored horror films like Night Tide and Games, and C, directed episodes of Charlie's Angels and Dynasty? The answer can only be Curtis Harrington. That's
Wow.
He's a character from a Quentin Tarantino film, isn't he? It's like from Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
Yeah, he would be actually.
Sexy Hamlet.
That's funny.
Ed, what have you got for us?
So mine is probably a little bit more predictable than that. It's Nobody's Perfect, which is the collection of film criticism by Anthony Lane, who I just adore. He's just, I mean, have either of you two ever met him?
No,
I stood in a queue in Venice, and he was standing in front of me, apparently. But
I don't think that really counts. But it's better than I've done. No, I just love him. I mean, for those who don't know him, he's one of the film critics of the New Yorker, and he's British. I quite rate the fact that he writes for the New Yorker, but he still lives in Cambridge, I think. And he's just got the most elegant, witty prose style. I mean, there aren't many film critics who'd have a bit of blurb from Martin Amis on the front cover of their book, which says it all. Like he's got his 5 movie-going maxims, which I will read to you now. Number 1, never read the publicity material, which I think is often good advice.
Yes.
Number 2, wherever possible, see a film in the company of ordinary human beings, i.e. not critics. Number 3, try to keep up with documentaries about Swabian transsexuals, or see everything regardless of budget and height. Number 4, whenever possible, pass sentence on a movie the day after it comes out. Otherwise, wait 50 years. And number 5, try to avoid the Lane technique of summer moviegoing. Most of which I think is fairly sound advice. I'm also fascinated by the fact that he's married to Alison Pearson, who is a British newspaper columnist who lately has kind of taken quite a sort of sharp turn to the right. Yes. And I'm sort of imagining what discussions must be like over their breakfast table, whether he sort of talks about seeing the latest, Tarantino or whatever, and she's kind of going on about immigrants or, Yeah, absolutely. But anyway, he's wonderful, and there's always a line of his that sticks in my mind. He's his review of The Revenant. There's that bit where DiCaprio's character kind of in homage. I always thought to Han Solo in Empire Strikes Back when he rips open a horse and gets into it because it's so cold. But
I thought these things smelled bad on the outside.
Yeah. But Lane says something like he does what anyone in the situation would do. He checks into a horse. Which I couldn't think of anyone who would come up with a line like that to describe that particular scene, which I thought was wonderful. So yeah, he's just really funny. He's really classy. I'm just glad he exists, and long may he do so.
I remember a line of his from the Scarlet Letter, the Gary Oldman, Demi Moore, quite sharply forgotten film, where he talks about them doing horizontal square dancing. That's how he describes them having sex. And he's just got these turns of phrases that he's actually one of those reviewers who's so good at writing and so funny that I get quite angry when I disagree with him about a film.
Yes,
because I'm like, no, that's not fair.
Often with him, you feel like the film is almost irrelevant. It's basically just him showing off what a great writer he is. But luckily, he's a great writer, so I forgive him for that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, guys, thanks so much for joining me on the podcast.
You're welcome.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, I'll
been
cut
easy
it.
Bleezy.
Well, now I'm not. Now I've got to cut it after because I've got to get easy Bleezy in.
So that's what we thought about Quentin Tarantino's novel of Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Thanks go to my guests, Ed Potton and Damon Wise, Damo, as we were calling him all the way through. Thanks also go to Elliot Atkins as ever for the music, Ali Harwood for the art, and until the next episode, please take care.
1-800-Flowers.com knows that a gift is never just a gift. A gift is an expression of everything you feel and helps build more meaningful relationships. 1-800-Flowers takes the pressure off by helping you navigate life's important moments by making it simple to find the perfect gift. From flowers and cookies to cake and chocolate, 1-800-Flowers helps guide you in finding the right gift to say how you feel. To learn more, visit 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST. That's 1-800-Flowers.com/ACAST.
Cue the fireplace and your favorite fall movie. There's nothing better than a cozy evening at home with a glass of First Leaf wine. First Leaf is a personalized wine club that delivers right to your door. Sounds magical, right? They get to know your favorite tasting notes, which varietals you enjoy, and whether you prefer sweet or dry wines. So in every shipment, you get bottles tailored to your unique palate. Go to tryfirstleaf.com/fall to get your first 6 wines for just $44.95 with free shipping.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.